Well, if you haven't heard by now, there's a new show on Netflix, Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War, and it is doing really well. It's got over 4 million views. And the reason I know it's successful is I'm inundated with people asking me how much of it's true, what did they get right, what did they leave out, are you going to do something on it? And I originally wasn't going to do anything on this because of my third question I'm going to answer, which is why is my name on this? We'll get to that in a minute. But let's start off with the show. Actually, let's go back to what brought me to the dance, which is a very similar show. And that is back in 1974, I was living in Tucson, and I had been interested in the Old West as a kid, but I kind of felt like I'd grown out of it. I was into rock and roll. I had a part of a degree. I was in art, and I was doing other things. And the show came on, David Wolper's Appointment with Destiny. And it was a docudrama. Actually, it was shot like a newsreel, which was so unique. And it was called Appointment with Destiny, Showdown at OK Corral. It was narrated by Lorne Greene, who was on Bonanza, if you're old enough to remember that reference. A great voice, baritone. And what was so cool about the show is they actually went to Tombstone, and they filmed a lot of the scenes there, and they filmed it as if it was a documenting the cameras, and some of the cowboys come up and push the camera away, like you would back when newsreels were a thing. It was really, really cool. It's all done in black and white. And for the actual gunfight at the OK Corral, so-called, they took out the wall that separates it from the highway if you go down there now, and they put sand and dirt all the way over it, and then they filmed a reenactment of the actual fight on the actual ground. So that was really impactful to me. And as a matter of fact, I made my way to Tombstone. I couldn't believe I hadn't been there since I was a child. I became immersed in the subject matter because the show so profoundly affected me. And I made a vow that I was going to put out a graphic novel of the gunfight at OK Corral in time for the centennial in 1981. Well, like what happens so many times to cartoonists like myself, I missed that deadline. But I did get the book out in time, actually by 1993, so I was off a little bit. But I finally put out my book, and since then I put out 17 books, and I now own True West Magazine, co-own it, and I'm the executive editor and have been there for 25 years. So you might say that that documentary had a profound change in my life. So I was very intrigued by this new show because it's been 50 years since that came out. And this new show, I have a hunch, is a bunch of kids, to me, who want to make their own version of the events in Tombstone. And that they have done. Okay, like I said, 4 million people have seen the show. And but there's a lot of controversy around the show with people like me. All right. And people like me are, if you are interested in Old West history, then you're kind of somebody that I can relate to. Okay. If you get crazy when historical accuracy is wrong, you're from my tribe. I'm not here to rip the show to shreds. Okay. I'm here to add some constructive criticism. All right. As Lyndon Baines Johnson so succinctly put it, any jackass can tear down a barn. It takes real, talent to build a barn. But here is the constructive criticism from me, okay? The hardest thing for me to swallow in this whole thing was the portrayal of Ike Clanton as a mob boss. Now, I know why they were trying to do that. They wanted to build him up so that Wyatt Earp would have a worthy adversary. But somehow, old man Clanton's oldest son, Ike Clanton, he was never the leader of the Cowboys. In fact, he was a bit of a loudmouth, which plays into how the gunfight actually happened. And it was patently obvious that the producers wanted to portray it this way. But to me, it was like trying to pass off Don Knotts as Don Corleone.
I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. Capiche? Capiche?
Because that's the kind of guy that Ike Clanton was. Now, he tried to talk the talk on the evening of October 25th, 1881. He went to many of the 66 bars in Tombstone. Now, think about this. This is a town of 10,000 people with 66 saloons. What was the second most popular thing to do in Tombstone? I think you know. So he went to most of these saloons. He was drunk, and he kept saying over and over again, all I want is 4 feet of ground to fight on. End of quote. Now, he finally harangues, you're not going to believe this, but it's true, Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp's leaving his pharaoh duties at the Oriental, and he's walking home, and this drunk is walking next to him, Ike Clanton, and he's, when you guys show in the morning, I'm gonna fight you. And Wyatt Earp says a great quote. He says, Ike, you talk too much for a fighting man. End of quote. Now, I don't know if you saw that in the movie and 12 hours later they're in the actual gunfight. That's a little hard to believe, but many times history's like that. What's the most ridiculous thing that could happen? Well, that's the way it came down. So take that into note when I get so super critical here, because sometimes the history turns on itself and comes back. For example, do you remember, if you've seen the show, you need to go see it so we can talk about this and have a good time talking about it. One of the things they make a big point about is that the Cowboys wore rattlesnake hatbands. Well, a lot of my friends, here's a hat I have that has a rattlesnake hatband. It's one of those things that's almost too good to be true. It's like, oh, really? They wore hatbands? And I would say, because I've been studying this for 50 years, that I've never seen that reference actually shown that was the case. However, I will say, and this is a caveat, that we used to poo-poo the red sashes. Remember in the movie Tombstone from 1993? And the Cowboys, Powers Booth, this Curly Bill, they're all wearing red sashes. And we were all, oh, that's BS. That never happened. And then a historian, Jeff Morey by name, he contacted me and he said, there's a interesting pioneer recollection by John Pleasant Gray. And in there, he said that the Cowboys of Cochise County were trying to emulate Wild Bill Hickok, who was known to wear sashes. So I hesitate. I kind of pull back a little bit on the rattlesnake thing because maybe that could be true. All right. But the one that isn't true, my biggest problem with the show is that Ike Clanton, once again, is wearing a 1972 Bull Rider flying taco hat. It never, it's just like it didn't exist back then. It would be like if you were seeing a documentary on Dillinger and they had him in a Yankees cap on backwards, you'd go, I don't think they wore caps like that in 1930. Here's a better example. Okay, Carmen Miranda with the bananas on her head. What if you saw a documentary on Crazy Horse and they had him in that? You'd laugh. You'd think that was ridiculous. Well, that's how we feel when we see somebody who didn't even do their homework to have the hat right. I mean, all right. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. But me and my friends, we're called True West Maniacs, by the way. We're crazy. We're just not insane. You don't want to watch a movie with us. You don't know. We love Westerns, okay? We just want them to kind of care enough to maybe do their due diligence on maybe what the main character's hat was. So I had to hold my nose. I almost created a template to block out the hat so I could watch the show and try to get the information they were trying to give me. But I was too lazy to do that, okay? Don't get me started on, at the end of the show, they make a case for the Arizona Rangers coming in to go after the Cowboys and dismantle the gang. Now that is true. The problem is there's been so many Ranger organizations. There was one there was Rangers in New Mexico and of course in Texas, but different from the one that we know today. And so in the show, they show a Arizona Ranger group at Morenci. It's a famous photo. but it's from 1903. So to put up a photo from 1903 that's conflating back to 1882, it would be like if you saw SEAL Team 6 on Normandy Beach. I mean, it's you got to do just a little bit of homework, okay? All right, so that's basically my issue of what they did not get right, okay? What did they leave out? Well, ironically or weirdly, Johnny Ringo is not in the show. He's not, obviously they've had too much other area to cover or whatever they didn't live in. But you asked me what did they leave out? That was one thing. But the big one is when Wyatt Earp is having this illicit affair with Josephine, who, by the way, was called Sadie Marcus when all the time she was in Arizona. And only later in life did she demand that everybody call her Josephine because Sadie was a woman of the night, which she was. And she didn't want to be called that. So to call her Josephine there kind of rings false to people like me who know what the real story is. But the real thing that they left out is Wyatt Earp was married at the time, and he was living with his second wife, Mattie Earp, in Tombstone. And he left her when he left Tombstone, and he hooked up with Josephine, who is Johnny Behan's live-in lover when he was in Tombstone. So that's weird about what did they leave out, okay? Finally, let's get to the end, which is why is my name on the show? That probably is intriguing to you considering how much I'm criticizing the show. But here's the deal, okay? Early on, the producers contacted me at True West Magazine, and they said if I was going to do a show on Wyatt Earp, who would I get to be the historians who could be the talking heads to carry the story forward? And I'm the one who gave them the contact info to what I believe are the big dogs in our business, okay? And that is Mark Lee Gardner, John Boesnecker, Casey T. Fertiller, Jeff Gwynn, and Paul Andrew Hutton. And they are magnificent. They are worth watching the show because every time they talk, what they say is dead on. It is dead on. And then we go to some reenactments where we have the Earps coming down the boardwalk, which looks like it was filmed in South Carolina. There's fog. It's not the desert. And three of the guys are not wearing hats. Are you flipping kidding me? Outside in the Victorian West, and three guys aren't wearing hats. That is absurd. And I'm sorry. I said I was going to stop on the criticism, but that is absurd. I could show you photograph after photograph of outdoor events, okay? A street scene in Chicago. Everyone, the women, the kids, everyone's wearing a hat. So that was just egregious. That was just beyond the pale, and I hated that part of it. But anyway, back to the good part. So those guys, Mark Lee Gardner and Casey T. Fertiller, in the episode about the fight at Cottonwood Springs. And by the way, there's contention about the Cottonwood Springs. I've got people that are contacting me and they're saying, Cottonwood Springs, everybody knows that was Mescal Springs and Iron Springs. It was not Cottonwood Springs. Well, the fact is they actually did their homework is that in about 2003, I think it is, a guy down in Sierra Vista discovered that the site that had been mentioned in the newspapers, which was the fight at Iron Springs, where Wyatt Earp allegedly killed Curly Bill, did not match Wyatt Earp's description of it. And there was this guy down in Tombstone who finally found it, and it makes more sense that it was at Cottonwood Springs. So a negative becomes a positive, and they actually knew what they were talking about when they did that. But Casey T. Fertiller's commentary on what that fight meant, it's worth looking it up. It took me to school. I went, man, no one has ever said that better. Fast forward, John Boesnecker talks about the violence in Cochise County and compares it to the Vietnam War, being in South Vietnam. It was that ridiculous. And so these are all wonderful insights. And so the show is really worth watching just to see these friends of mine talk. And I must say that all of them, and this is kudos to the makers of this docuseries, every time they talk, they put up the person's book underneath it, okay? And all of them have told me that their book sales have skyrocketed because of this. In fact, Mark Lee Gardner's book on its forthcoming book on the friendship between Doc and Wyatt is not even out till next November, and he's getting all these calls from people saying we want that book. So that is a good thing. That is a fabulous thing. And let's bring it full circle here. In the end, enthusiasm covers most bets. All right. This show has brought new fans, people to our arena. And if they go to Tombstone like some snotty kid did in 1974, and they are encouraged, they are enthusiastic about telling their version of the story, which obviously is part of the new version. These are kids who said, we want to tell our version. Then it will all been worth it. In the future, though, I would only ask one thing. Would you please call me about the hats? Okay. I don't want to see hats like this in a movie. This is a 1950s hat. Okay. All right. You want to see a hat that they probably wore. This is a hat they probably wore. Okay. You don't do that. Anyway, call me and I'll help you so you can avoid stepping in historical doo-doo. I'm Bob Boze Bell, and this has been a very mixed message.